Good evening. I am Sean Gale, Assistant City Manager and spokesperson here at the City of Miramar. Thank you for joining us with this edition of Conversations with Mayor Messam. Today, we're discussing everything you need to know about voting in Broward County. We have with us today Laura Uribe, who is a member of the League of Women Voters of Broward County. Now, Laura is an incoming PhD student at the University of California in San Diego, where she will be studying American politics with a focus on voting behavior. Also on our panel today is Broward County Supervisor of Elections, Peter Antonacci. Mr. Antonacci is a former state attorney, and he's also the past CEO of Enterprise Florida and Florida's Secretary of Commerce. Mayor Messam and our special guests will be taking your questions, so please go ahead, type them in our comment section, and we will be sure to get to them during our questions and answers. I'll now turn over to Mayor Messam for his opening introduction. Mayor Messam, the floor is yours, sir.
Sean, and good evening, everyone. Thanks again for joining this segment of Conversations with Mayor Messam. The last few months have been very challenging for us all due to COVID-19, which has changed all aspects of our daily lives. South Florida has now become ground zero for new positive cases, and we continue to urge our community to wear face masks and practice social distancing so that we can do our part to help flatten the curve. Our first responders and first line responders have been doing an amazing job under such challenging conditions. But now, since this year is a big election year, I felt that this topic of voting was important for me to discuss elections in a COVID-19 environment. And I'm just so thrilled to have our Supervisor of Elections for Broward County here to just share some valuable information. You know, many of you have sent me questions with concerns about how to vote safely and will there be any changes to our voting process due to the coronavirus. Tonight's conversation is designed to address these and many other questions to prepare you for the election process. Last month, the CDC recommended that voters consider alternatives to casting ballots in person in upcoming elections, including voting by mail and early voting to reduce crowds at polling stations. The CDC suggested that state and local election officials take steps to minimize crowds at voting locations, including offering alternative voting methods. The CDC guidance said voters who want to cast ballots in person should consider showing up at off-peak times, bring their own black pens or touchscreen pens for voting machines, and wash their hands before entering and after leaving the polling location. Workers and voters are also required to wear face coverings. Our Supervisor of Elections, Peter Antonacci, will go into all that we need to know about our voting options here in Florida. Peter, thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Mayor Messam, for arranging for this, and thank you, Ms. Gale and Ms. Uribe, for joining me. This is an even-numbered year, and it's we typically have the Olympics and presidential elections during even-numbered years, and we're going to have elections this year. We've already had one in March, which was our presidential preference primary, and now we've got our August political partisan primary, as well as the general election in November. Preparations have gone on here. You know, people think that if election day is November 3rd, that's when the election is. Not so. Actually, the election begins at least 45 days before November 3rd, 45 days before August 18th, because that's when the ballots are mailed, both to our overseas voters and to domestic voters here who requested vote by mail ballots. So as you can imagine, there's lot goes into putting on the show, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have about putting on our show, and I very much appreciate y'all's interest.
Thank you so much, Mr. Antonacci. We also have with us today Laura, as we mentioned before, Laura Uribe. Now, Laura, in every U.S. presidential election since 1964, more women than men have turned out to the polling stations to vote. How has the League of Women empowered the female voters, especially minorities, to participate in elections? Can you just give that introductory speech from your for the League of Women Voters.
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to represent the League of Women Voters for Broward, and thank you for putting the panel together. So a bit of history, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. We have never supported any candidate or office. What we do instead is that we promote major policy issues and influence policy through education and advocacy. Our organization was founded in 1920, so we just celebrated 100 years as an organization together. And in those 100 years, we've made sure to educate the public about their elections and how they can get more involved in democracy. So some of the things that we do to empower voters are candidate forums, which my fellow league members will be doing very shortly. This is co-hosted with the ACLU of Florida. And some of the candidate forums that we've hosted so far are the Public Defender's Office, State Attorney, Clerk of Court. We've done the Supervisor of Elections, and several circuit and civil court judges. In the before COVID times, we were also very active out in the community in different outreach events. So we did a couple in Miramar at the Multicultural Music Festival, the Hispanic Festival back in September. We did MLK Day in February, and we did Mayor Messam's annual 5K race in March. And we just talk to people about the importance of voting, make sure that they're registered, that their registration is up to date. And if any group wants a member of the League of Women Voters to go and talk, we do have a speakers bureau in a couple different languages that can go in and share this information with voters.
Thank you so much. Very good information. And so we're going to kick off our question and answer session this afternoon with Mr. Antonacci. Sir, you mentioned earlier that the election date is not November 4th, it's actually August 18th. And if you would just go ahead and talk about that right now. When is election date? When does early voting start? And what does that process look like?
Well, election day for the primary is the 18th of August. Early voting begins on the 8th of August in Broward County and will run through the 16th of August. We've changed the dates around here a little bit. I kind of like the way Miami-Dade has done it in the past. During the weekdays, they start later in the day, but they keep open later for working folks. So we're going to do that during the weekdays. We're going to stay open till 7. We're going to run 11 to 7 on weekdays in August, and then we'll run 9 to 5 on the weekends. And I think that will better accommodate people's schedules. The other important date you should remember is coming up here Monday, July 20th, is book closing date. And by book, we mean the voter registration rolls. So if you want to be a registered voter, you got to sign up 29 days before any election. That 29th day is July 20th. So I urge anybody who wants to register to vote by the 20th so you can vote in the August election. There will also be a book closing day for the general election. November 3rd is the general election, and 29 days before that. I don't have that date in front of me, but I think it's October 8th.
Does the book closing, sir, include a deadline for party affiliations, or is it just for voter registration?
Both.
Okay. So another question we want to ask: how can someone request a vote by mail ballot, and are they still able to request those?
Yes, for the August election, if you go to our webpage, which is www.browardsoe.org, the first thing that assaults you is our very obnoxious pop-up. And the pop-up says, hey, do you want to vote by mail ballot? Hey. So before you even get to our good information that we have on our webpage, we assault you with a vote by mail request form. And we've also mailed out about 1 million postcards to Broward voters. We mailed those out beginning of June. And those postcards are very handy ways to free of charge send those in so that vote by mail requests could be fulfilled. We've had pretty good results from those two. We mailed over the last 2 weeks, we mailed out 310,000 ballots. to 1.2 million voters. And we're getting ready to do another sweep tomorrow because, anytime you send out a ballot, it's just a snapshot in time of who's requested them. And they're coming in at about 2,500 a day. So we'll do a sweep tomorrow, and I think we'll send out maybe another 20 to 25,000 next week. And I think before everything's said and done, we'll be north of about 375,000 ballots that will be requested. Now, keep in mind one thing: just because people get a ballot in the mail doesn't mean that they send it back. So in the past, the data on that is pretty interesting. In 2018, only about 71% of voters who receive vote by mail ballots returned them in the primary, and in 2016 primary, it was about 62, low 60%. So oftentimes people get those ballots and they use them for other purposes. They use them for prep. They bring them with them to vote in person. Where they decide not to vote, or they exercise their right and throw it away.
Thank you so much, sir. Mayor Messam, did you want to piggyback off of anything for our viewers to, if they haven't requested a ballot yet, did you want to mention anything on that end? We're not able to hear you, sir.
Yeah. Oh, right.
We're not able to hear you, so we'll move on with another question. This time we'll have a question for Mr. Uribe. Could you go ahead and tell our viewers this evening, what is the importance of voting? Why should I turn out to the polling station and vote?
That's one of my favorite questions to answer. I think everyone who has the opportunity to vote kind of knows of its importance, or mostly everyone knows how important it is to turn out to vote. A couple years ago, I was very lucky to be able to teach a citizenship course to permanent residents who were going to take their citizenship exam. And I don't think I've ever seen a more engaged or eager group of people to turn out to vote and participate in democracy. So it's important because it is your civic duty, and it deals with a lot of local, state, and federal decisions, either directly or indirectly. So a good example of one of those here locally is the Broward County, the penny surtax that we voted in. So that's actually really helpful for us here in Broward, so that our municipalities are able to work on these transportation projects and make sure that our roads are kept safe and top notch. A couple other indirect things that happens, I guess, when you do participate in democracy are a little more, I guess, indirect. So if you were following the ICE ruling for international students, we end up voting these people in who make these large level decisions. So democracy only really works if people participate. It's meant to be a country of by and for the people. And in order to make it work, you have to turn out to vote.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Antonacci, if we could pose the next question to you, sir. There's so much conversation around mail-in ballots and whether or not it's safe to mail in a ballot. Is my ballot going to be counted? Over time, we've had some confusion over those kinds of conversations. Could you talk to that? Talk a little bit about that, sir? How secure is it to mail in your ballot? How comfortable should people be that their vote is going to be counted? Can you speak to that process a little bit?
Sure. Try to think about this on two levels. One is a technical level, and the other is on a practical voter-oriented level. So on the technical level, the systems that have been approved and deployed by supervisors around the state work pretty well. So you, Ms. Gale, you asked for your vote by mail ballot. You get sent a vote by mail ballot, and you have a choice. You can either put that ballot after you sign it. It's got to be signed. You can either put it in the mail, give it to your letter carrier, or put it in a mailbox somewhere, or you can drop it off at one of our early voting sites. So we have 22 early voting sites, and beginning on the 8th of August, you can go to any of our early voting sites. You will not have to stand in line. There will be a separate place for voters that want to drop off vote by mail ballots can do that without having to stand in line with people who are waiting to vote. Although, practically speaking, I don't think we're going to have much in the way of lines this year because of the virus situation. So the technical side works pretty well, because then we get the ballot in our hands, and then our machinery works to verify that, in fact, a ballot was sent to you. You're the person that sent it back to us, and then the canvassing board supervises the tabulation. That system works. What I warn people of is it's a really insidious thing, and that is, if you put a ballot in the mail, you're losing a little bit of the privacy that is connected, the sanctity of the privacy that's connected with balloting, because it's out there in the mail. So I tell people to guard that privacy zealously. Guard the confidentiality of your ballot zealously. Now, many people like to engage their family in the voting process, and that's perfectly okay. That's family business. That's kitchen table stuff, and government should not interfere with that. But it's up to the voter who to involve. But you're going to be having people this election and any election that want to intrude in that want to interfere, that want to invade. And these include people who want to come around and collect your ballot. Don't give your ballot to a person who is unknown to you. Only give your ballot to the post office or drop it off yourself.
So in that light, sir, because we want to make sure that people's ballots are sent in on time, is there a deadline that the ballots must be postmarked by? So should they be postmarked by a certain date?
That's a little bit of an involved question. Let me do it this way. We had the statute changed a little bit this year, so we are not allowed to receive vote by mail requests 8 days before the election. We can send them out 6 days before the election. And the reason for that change was because we had so many ballots coming in late. We're all in this together, we human beings. And I don't know about y'all on the phone, but I'm a procrastinator. I'll procrastinate everything. I'll procrastinate a peanut butter sandwich. So we're trying to encourage people to get these ballots in on time. And so forcing the supervisors or preventing the supervisors from sending them out late is a good start. Second thing, the ballots must be received by 7 p.m. on election night, so on August 18th and November 3rd. Now, we have a slight barrier here in Broward County. Several years ago, I don't know why I wasn't here. As you know, I'm a temp here, and I don't know how it all worked out, but the post office decided to make Broward County an orphan. And the post office said, no, Broward County, you may have 2 million people in Broward County, but you don't get your own post office. What you get is Opelika. Too bad. You don't like it? Too bad. So all of the ballots that we receive end up being processed in Opelika. And there were in excess of 1,000 ballots that were left behind in 2018. That were left behind in the Opelika post office because there was not an efficient agreement with them about how to grab those things and get them out of their hands and get them into our hands. We now have a system set up, worked pretty well in March, having a member of my staff standing outside the post office, real kind of needy and ready, saying, hey, give me all the ballots, and getting them up here as quick as possible. We had the highway patrol escort them and get them up here real quick. So that we could get the results out timely. We think that's going to work pretty well in August and November. We'll have two drops to get those ballots in. But if they're in after 7 o'clock, it's not even that they don't count. They're not even ballots under the law. They're not open. They're nothing if they're late. So we encourage people to send them in as soon as they get them, fill them out, and send them in. Don't be a procrastinator like me.
All right, thank you so much, sir. We want to go to the mayor. Hopefully we can hear him this time around. Mayor Messam, can you talk about early voting sites, sir, in the city of Miramar? Do we have any, and how can residents find those? We're still not able to hear you, sir. We're still not able to hear you. No, we're not able to hear you. So I'm going to go back to Mr. Antonacci.
Yeah, I can
Sir,
tell you, we've got a at the Miramar Branch Library, and is one. I think there's one other, Mayor, is there not? I think there's one that's right adjacent to you.
and that library is right there at Town Center.
Yeah, that's in town. Yeah, exactly. That's where it is.
Yes. So if I can ask you, sir, if the ballots need to be received by 7 p.m. on election day, people just need to know if you've mailed in your ballot, you don't show up to vote at the same time. Because if somebody shows up to the polling station and they've already mailed in their ballot, what system is there to determine that this person has already been given that opportunity through mail?
Yeah, that's another question dealing with the technical capacity of the software. And how the software works is that if you've voted by mail or earlier or on election day, the system will only accept one ballot. So you have a voter ID number, and that voter ID number is connected with your ballot, whether it's any of the three methodologies, and it is remarkably efficient. I'm the last person to talk about tech, but I'm just sort of blown away at how efficient it is and how little problem we have. And for people who vote by mail, they can follow their ballot through our system, going on our website, following the prompts. You can actually see when your ballot arrives, when it has been received, when it's been opened, and tabulated. Pretty good system.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to go to Laura for this question. Laura, can you talk a little bit about the organization, the League of Women Voters? Who typically makes up this group, and how do they engage with the community?
So the League of Women Voters, like I said a little earlier, we started in 1920, right before the passage of the Women's Suffrage Amendment, and we have never supported any candidate or office. We have over 700 leagues across the nation with over 500,000 members. So here locally in the League of Women Voters of Broward, we have nearly 400 members. And we range from ages 18, which is when you can first register to vote if you're eligible, or when you can first become a registered voter, because you can pre-register at 16, to 85. So we also have student memberships. The league does tend to skew a little bit older, but we do encourage younger members to join the league and participate.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Antonacci, we have a question from one of our viewers that said they actually did receive a voter's registration, the proof that they were registered to vote, but nothing that said they have the ability to vote from home as of yet. And I don't know what from home means. Maybe they haven't received any communication that says they can request a mail-in ballot. Can you talk about the different means of communication that is sent out to different individuals that are registered to vote?
As I previously mentioned, we sent out 1 million postcards in June. I hope your Facebook caller there gives me the information so I can track down why she hasn't received a vote by mail request postcard, because she should have. Otherwise, I can tell you that the political parties are aggressively engaged in getting their voters motivated to vote by mail. I think that's very important. That's on the private side, and that's a very good thing because voters listen to their political parties much more than they listen to government officials. And there's also, as mentioned, our webpage that I think is very helpful to people who are web savvy.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mayor Messam, I think we can hear you now. Go ahead and chime in, sir.
Kind of hard to have conversation with the mayor without being able to hear him, right?
I agree.
Well, I did wanted to ask a question that I've received from residents, and some residents are wondering, for example, has there been a purge of any from the voter rolls for Broward County? And if so, how can someone check their voter status?
Yeah, you can look up your voter status online as well. There's been a lot of misinformation. Of course, people use this stuff for whatever agenda they have. There, in Florida at least, I'm not going to speak for South Dakota or New Jersey, whatever, but in Florida, there is no such thing as a purge. When you register to vote, everyone who's ever registered to vote in Broward County is in the database today.
Yeah.
Alive or dead, they're still there. Once you register, you're there. And there are three categories of voters in our system. You are an active voter, got 1.2 million of those, an inactive voter, and I don't know how many of those there are, and there is something called an ineligible voter. An ineligible voter for 100 different reasons. You've transferred to another county, you've deceased, but anybody who's ever filed one is in there. So purge is just, it's a bad word in my line of work because we don't purge. I think what people are asking about generally is, are they active or not? And if they're active, they can vote. If they're inactive, they can vote. All they have to do is show up on election day or send us a vote by mail request, and we'll activate. It's real simple. But no purging. We keep you. Once we got you, we just hug you. We keep hugging you. We don't let you go.
So speaking of that, sir, what does somebody need to bring with them when they show up on election day? When they come to vote, exactly what should they have to prove that they're the person registered to vote?
Yeah, a picture ID is, and Florida's a little different. Again, I'm not speaking for other states, but we've had a picture ID requirement now for about 25 years, and so our voters are very accustomed to it. It works pretty well. Our voter turnout is very high in presidential elections and gubernatorial elections, and not so low when we're voting on bond issues for the city of Margate, for example. I know you don't have bond issues in Miramar, Mayor.
So,
are you putting any questions on our ballot this time? Because we got some of your colleagues. I think Davey has 14 questions on the ballot. We're going to have an enormous ballot in November, this is a very serious matter. The size of the ballot confounds voters because the way things are looking right now, our ballot is going to be 5 pages both sides in November. 10 pages that voters have to look at. It's going to be similar to 18 when we had all those constitutional amendments.
Yeah.
And it's just the way it is. And as good government advocates over the past 20 years have advocated that municipal elections take place in the fall, during general election cycle, all that means is gigantic ballots. One of the aspects of that is gigantic ballots. We're going to have a challenge this time with our voters come November. As you know, the August ballot is quite uncomplicated. It's only 1 page, 2 sides.
Yeah, the city of Miramar, we don't have any ballot questions for the November election. And in speaking about the primary, many of our local elections are typically decided at the primary level. So it's important that folks make sure they check their status and vote their candidates of choice. Can you speak to the provisions that you and your staff and your team are making to ensure that voting precincts are safe, obviously with the concerns of the coronavirus? Can you speak to what provisions are being made right now for voting sites?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It's important for our voters to have an option. Some people want to see their fellow citizens at the polling place, and old school people like me just accustomed to it. So all of our poll workers are going to be masked and gloved at early voting. This goes for in-person voting, early and on election day. Masks and gloves, and all our poll workers are going to have their temperatures taken before the beginning of the day to make sure that they're healthy when they walk in the door. We have done a little bit of a patch on to our system, and our system, as you all know, normally requires you to take a stylus and sign the document that says that you're getting the ballot, and that's on a little pad. And we know people are not going to want to touch that pad. So in lieu of that, we've ditched the stylus, We've ditched the pad, and we're going to have just a simple sheet of paper that you sign, and we're going to give you your own pen. The pen comes encased in a plastic container. You can pick the pen out of the plastic with your plastic on it, take it out, sign your ballot receipt, take your ballot to the privacy booth, and use your pen to execute that ballot, and then you take the pen. That's your I voted sticker. Instead of we'll have I voted too, but that's an additional thing. The pen will say I voted on it as well. One other additional thing we're doing, and I think this is real important. It's very expensive, but democracy is not cheap all the time. We're going to hire what amounts to domestic laborers for each of our early voting sites and our election place, our in-person election sites. And that person is going to be in charge of making sure that those privacy booths and those common areas are sprayed down every time somebody votes there. So it's going to take a lot to do this at some of our early voting sites, because as you know, Miramar is a high turnout voting site, early voting site. So it's going to take some doing for these people that we're going to hire, but we're going to go out on the private market and hire these people to keep the voting places as clean as possible for the peace of mind of our voters.
So
Okay.
obviously the precinct is not a place of employment where employers or a property owner may be taking temperatures for individuals entering the property. So will voters be temperature checked?
No. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
voters.
so I think you can give in to health concerns only up to a point.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to jostle voters about anything. I know that we've got a county commission, and probably some of our cities have ordinances or emergency orders about masks. But I'm afraid I don't have the heart to tell people they can't vote because they won't wear a mask. I'm going to offer them a mask. We're going to suggest that they wear a mask. But you're going to have some people that are just going to be recalcitrant. And I'm not going to ask them to give up their constitutional right over a mask. There'll be very few of them. We'll make sure we clean up after them after they vote. But there's too much at stake in the right to vote to force people to do things that they shouldn't be asked to do to exercise the franchise.
Will it be self-policing for voters in terms of maintaining 6 feet separation while queued and waiting for line, or what provisions will be made available regarding keeping social distancing?
Yeah, we have signage, and all our clerks have been very aggressively trained on keeping people separated during the day. And that's gonna work well at some places. Some other places it's not. One other thing that's changed this cycle from last, and this has to do with the advocates. So you walk up to a polling place, particularly at early voting, and you've got 50 people out there waving signs at you, and they're trying to give you little pieces of paper, and you're trying to go in and say, hey, I want to clear mine when I go, but it's allowed. And the advocates were allowed 100 feet away from the polling station. But the legislature changed that and changed it to 150 feet. And you got to take my word for it that when we measure these things out, that 50 feet sometimes is a chasm, because sometimes it ends up in the middle of the road. And so we're going to have some issues with the advocates. People behaved themselves pretty well during the March election. We had Pembroke Pines city election, as you probably know, and that was a pretty hot election. The advocates were pretty good, but that 150 feet thing is a big change for our active political people.
Mr. Antonaggio, we have a couple of questions that have come in from our viewers. And one of them is, what is the website that you can go to follow your ballot once it has been mailed? Is there somewhere that individuals can go follow up to see what's the status of their ballot?
Yeah, you go to www.browardsoe.org, and there are various buttons to push along the way that you can see to follow your ballot.
Okay, great information. Thank you, sir. Another question is regarding a resident alien or green card holder. Somebody wants to know, can a resident alien or a green card holder vote in an election? What is the deadline to register to vote for the August election? And what's the deadline to register for the November election?
Only citizens of the United States can vote.
Okay,
And the-
perfect. And then, so the question about, another question about November, they want to know how many locations are going to be open. So I think this speaks to the polling station process. How do people identify their precinct? Can you speak to that process a little bit? I think that's where this viewer is going with that question.
All right, there's a couple of handy things involved here, just some information. We have 22 early voting sites spread around the county. And today, there are 577 individual precincts. Those precincts are created by the county commission every 10 years after the bicentennial census. Those precincts over the years have consolidated a great deal. So we don't have that many voting locations. We've consolidated them. And in March, we had about 421 voting locations to accommodate the 577 precincts. So some voting locations had 2 precincts, some had 3, some had 4. But because of the coronavirus, we've been evicted. Some of our landladies and landlords just booted us out, and so we're down to 385 polling locations, and you can find your polling location on your voter information card, or you can go on the web page, and there's a big red button in the middle of the web page that says "Find your ballot," and you can go there today, punch your address in there, and your ballot style will come up. And for this election, we have 119 different ballot styles. So we had to print 119 different forms of ballots to accommodate Democrats, Republicans, and NPAs this time. But you can find your individual ballot online today by just punching in your address. Go to that red button right in the middle of the page.
Thank you so much, sir. There's another question from our viewers. Does the city or county offer assistance for seniors or those with disabilities on election day, or even during early voting? Can you speak to any assistance that's provided for individuals with disabilities?
I don't know whether the county does that or any of our municipalities.
Well, there are many community organizations that will provide rides to the polls, and that's where the individual efforts of advocates like Women League of Voters, Black Greek Letter organizations, churches. There are many organizations in the community that provide these services. We definitely encourage seniors or anyone that may be mobilely challenged to vote by mail, because it removes that barrier. That's a convenient process. So there are options, but I don't think that the Supervised Elections Office directly would provide that resource. Another question I have is that depending, I'm not sure if the primary elections will be this way, but there could be a scenario for the general elections where the polling locations they're lined beyond 7 o'clock period. So what policy or what procedure would be in place to allow those individuals that may be in long lines that are waiting, and it's 7 o'clock and they have yet to cast their votes, although they've been in line for a while?
Just prediction wise, I don't think that's going to happen this August because of turnout and the nature of the election and vote by mail, but it's possible that would happen in November. The law is that if you're in line at 7 o'clock, the poll deputy, and we have poll deputies at each polling location, puts a stanchion out there behind the last person that lines up, and if you're beyond that stanchion, you're ineligible to vote. Now, as we know from experience, typically people are importuning the courts to keep things open longer under certain circumstances, and sometimes courts do, sometimes they don't. Whatever the courts and the governor tell me to do, I'll do outside of the current law.
Now, understanding all of those challenges, sir, that Does that require additional personnel, and are there jobs available for individuals to assist on election day? And if there are, how would they go about applying for them?
We are always recruiting poll workers, and let me see if I can find that number for you. Our poll worker number 954-357-7050. We always recruit poll workers, particularly bilingual poll workers. But I have to report to you that our poll workers are primarily senior citizens, and our poll workers have been warriors. The response has been heartwarming. I can't even express how heartwarming it is to me to see my fellow seniors out there saying, yes, we want to work on election day. Yes, we want to make democracy work. You provide me enough hand sanitizer and I'll be there. We could always use extra poll workers because it's good having a cushion, but we're doing great because our people are great.
How can we
one more
support
question.
how can we support the poll workers? So, for example, if the city or if a community organization wants to come by to perhaps bring them food, I know they get breaks and are to just provide them things to keep them, encouraged, energized as they're going through this very long day of processing all these votes. What can we do to support what I would call frontline supporters in the voter process?
I really hadn't thought about that, Mayor, but any kind of civic courtesy would be welcome because our poll workers, it is a long day. 7 to 7 is a long day if you're, a healthy young person like y'all. If you're on Medicare, it's a little hard, 7 to 7. So any kindness, civic kindness particularly would be very welcome. I like cookies myself.
I'm going to pose another question to Ms. Uribe. Could you tell us how is the women of the League of Women Voters encouraging participation in the election process at this time? Do you have a social media campaign that you try to reach out to individuals? How do you connect with the public to encourage voting?
Thank you for the question. If I may quickly, before answering that question that was posed to the supervisor about, I believe it was accessibility to voting for people who might have disabilities. There is an election machine called the Express Vote Kiosk that's specifically for individuals who have trouble using the DS200s. And I think the supervisor might be able to talk a little bit more about that. But from my understanding of that machine, it is a more accessible way to vote. If you have trouble writing or for some reason filling in your ballot, you can use that. There is a video on the League's website and on the supervisor's website that shows you how to use that. And if I recall correctly, back in 2018, there was a staff member from the Supervisor of Elections that would go to assisted living centers, I believe during the early voting period too, to help our elderly residents who might need that extra help to turn out to vote. So that's a little background I know on that. I'm not sure if it would supplement that answer. Now, for the League's campaign, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we do have a heavy social media presence, and we do have those candidate forums that I find very, very, very helpful in figuring out who to vote for. So there's obviously the technical aspect, getting your ballot very important, making sure that it's counted, tracking the status of your ballot, but also the education side of things, making sure that you know who you're voting for, where these candidates stand on the issues, and that when you are ready to cast that ballot, you are an informed person in the process.
Thank you so much. Mayor Messam, did you
excuse me, could I follow up a little bit on that, Sean?
Okay.
So there's a provision in Florida statute that allows for something called supervised voting, and that's what Ms. Uribe was referring to. So supervised voting applies to any ALF, nursing home, or other licensed entities. And the way it works is that the nursing home contacts the supervisor, says we want to participate in supervised voting, and we gather up the ballots of the people who want to participate at that facility, and we take them to the facility and actually present them their ballots, and then gather them together and bring them back. That is, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is what a big change from this election. I did it myself during the March election. I went to 3 nursing homes and participated in it. And it's a pretty interesting process, and people are pretty enthusiastic. We had it was around 450 votes from nursing homes in that cycle, and we could expect several thousand in November, except that the current orders dealing with nursing homes prohibit it, and the nursing home administrators don't want you around. So supervised voting has been suspended by the virus. Now we are still gathering up vote by mail requests from those voters and getting the ballots to the nursing homes, but we're simply not assisting them as we have done in the past, as the statute permits. Second thing, she mentioned the express vote, which is a system that is at every precinct and every early voting site, and it is for the hearing and visually impaired. That's the question I heard before was about transportation for handicapped people. But if you persons who are handicapped and show up at the polls and want to use those assisting devices, they are available.
Mayor Messam, did you want to follow that, sir, with any questions regarding that?
Well, I would just, I would encourage the viewers that be proactive. Just be your brother's keeper, your sister's keeper. If you're a member of a church or an organization, and if you have senior members who may need assistance, I just encourage you to engage with them. Provide the information that we're providing everyone tonight in terms of making perhaps the absentee ballot request. We definitely don't want you to expose that senior to any risk in terms of the coronavirus, but call them, see if they need any additional resources. You can refer them to the BrowardFOE.org website, where they can register to vote by mail. Anything to help our community to make sure that they are exercising their right to cast a ballot. And there are many resources that are available. The Supervised Elections Office is making a lot of provisions for each precinct to do the best they can to keep the precinct safe. This is going to be a community effort. What I don't want as a mayor of Miramar is that Miramarians stay home because of any concerns or fear for voting. If you don't want to go to a precinct to vote, you can just vote by mail or vote early, where you can go during the day, during non-peak hours, where there probably will be very few people at these off-peak hours, where you can go in and vote without being around many voters. So don't procrastinate, as the supervised election has stated that he loves to do. Don't be like the supervised election, but vote,
like me.
Vote as early as you can, and or vote by mail if you're concerned.
So I'm going to give the opportunity to Ms. Uribe. If there are any questions that, any points that you want our viewers to know this afternoon that the questions did not pull out, but you do want to make sure that viewers know before we leave this session today, could you please go ahead and express those at this time? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's a couple things actually that I wanted to bring up specifically for Miramar. So in the 2016 election, there were almost 18,500 voters in Miramar who did not turn out to vote. And the league identified 2 precincts in particular. So the Sunset Lakes Community Center and New Renaissance Middle School, where nearly 2,000 voters in each of them did not turn out to vote. And so that included in the first precinct, nearly 700 Hispanic voters. Entonces, mi gente, si hablas español, si es un votante español, por favor salga a votar. And in the second precinct, nearly 800 Black voters too. So we need to turn out to vote in Miramar. You have a great example in Mayor Messam encouraging you to turn out to vote. So let's get those numbers a little higher this year. And then I also pulled, as of last night, the vote by mail ballot requests for the city of Miramar. So currently there are 21,000 registered voters in Miramar who have requested their vote by mail ballots. There's about 85,000 registered. So that's hovering around 25% of people who have requested the ballot, which is great. So if you want to get those numbers up too, that would be very, very good to do leading up to the election.
Great
That's some great
information. Thank you.
insight. Great insight. Great insight.
Yes, yes, absolutely, Mayor Messam, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Uribe. Right now, we're going to give Mr. Antonacci the opportunity. If there are any points that you want to leave with our viewers, sir, any questions that were not asked here today, if you would go ahead and just give those points to our viewers, and just to make sure they come on out and vote on election day.
I think I've gas bagged enough tonight, but I give people my phone number. Call me if you have any questions. It's 850-510-7754. I love talking about elections and encouraging people to learn more about it. So call me if you need me.
Got that, sir. And one last question came in, and it's about sample ballots. Where can individuals get a sample ballot?
As I mentioned, you can get your own sample ballot by just going on our website, punching that red button, and putting your address in. And I think it's important that it's helpful to get your own ballot. As I mentioned, there's 119 different ballot styles out there on the street right now, and it's helpful to get your own. Plus, we're required to publish them in the newspapers. So you'll see in the Sun Sentinel, El Sentinel, and the West Side Gazette over the next 2 weeks, you'll see the full ballot, which includes all elections for all voters, including our universal primaries. We have here I'm going to talk a little bit too much. I'm sorry. This is a question. We've had a lot of questions about this because people have gotten their ballots in their hand. Florida is a closed primary state, which means that only members of a political party can vote in their party elections for the purposes of electing a candidate for the general election for any office. However, our Constitution was amended and took effect in the year 2000 to allow for something called a universal primary. So when the primary election in any cycle is in fact the general election, because there is no opposition from the other political party or any other candidate in that race, it means that all voters may vote in that political primary. So we've gotten a lot of calls from NPA voters and Republican voters wanting to know why their ballot has a Democratic race on it. We have 2 countywide races that are universal, and we have 3 state legislative races that are universal. So been a lot of questions about that, but it's because of the uniqueness of our not very frequently occurring universal primary opportunity.
And one last one, sir. Can you talk about the homeless population and how do they engage with the election process?
People who are homeless may register to vote, and they, if they do, the address that you can put on the application is the address for the downtown administration building. It escapes me for the moment. But then they will be put into the downtown precinct for purposes of voting.
Okay, thank you so much. Very informative, sir. Thank you so much for that great information. Mayor Messam, we're going to turn over to you now, sir, for any closing remarks that you have for our viewers this afternoon.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank Peter Antonacci, our Broward County Supervisor of Elections, and Laura Uribe, who's representing the Women League of Voters, and for just coming out and sharing information. I thought this topic was very important. Our community is used to the Supervised Elections Office engaging the community and providing information about the election process. And we all know with COVID-19 that ability to really go out and outreach into the community has been adversely impacted. Since I've always am encouraging the community to come out and vote, more than just telling people to come out and vote. We have to provide the resources, and what best resource to have than to actually have the supervised election to come out and share valuable information, as well as advocates like Laura Uribe and the Women League of Voters. So I'd like to thank both of them for taking their time to come out to help inform and educate our community. As our residents, we continue to ask you to be vigilant, study up on the candidates. This forum tonight is not to endorse or advocate for any particular candidate. It's just to advocate for you. Advocate for you to get the information so that you know where to register, where to get voting information, and how you can safely vote. The next two conversations with Mayor Messam are two engaging topics. On July 29th, I will have our Budget Director, Norman Mason, and our Broward County Property Appraiser, Marty Keir. On here, we'll talk about the budget process and your property taxes. You know, some people think that the city of Miramar makes up all of their tax bill, and we get all the complaints on why your property taxes are so high, but we only represent about 30% of your tax bill. And we want to educate you on that budget process so that you can know where the value of your property is assessed and where it comes from, so that you can be informed about your property. And our second conversation, which will take place on August 12th, right before school, we will have our Superintendent of Broward Schools, Robert Rusty, back on with us again, as well as our Broward School Board member, Patty Good, to talk about what the school year will look like as we open up in the fall. That was a very popular subject matter. We had so many questions, we couldn't even get to all of the questions, and we'll be able to identify and announce what exactly will be the plan that our students and teachers will have in the fall. And we want to ensure that you as parents are prepared for the upcoming school year. So on behalf of the city of Miramar, we want to continue to encourage you to be safe out there. Get tested. We have a testing site right in the city of Miramar, which is free. No appointments are needed. It's a walk-up testing site at 7000 Miramar Parkway at the Vernon E. Hargrave Youth Enrichment Center. We're processing over 500 cases per day. The city of Miramar, we crossed the 2,000 threshold in terms of positive cases since the tracking of COVID-19. You know, although we are significantly lower than our peer cities like Fort Lauderdale and Hollywood and Pompano Beach, but just one positive case is too much for me, because we love you, we care for you, and we want you to be around to survive this. So don't let your guard down. Get tested, stay 6 feet apart, and just wear the mask. So God bless you, God keep you, and we'll see you on July 29th. Sean?
Thank you,
Thank you
Mayor.
so much, Mayor Messam. Thank you so much, Mayor Messam. And thank you to our panelists this afternoon. And most importantly, thank you to our viewers for tuning in today. And thank you so much for sending in your questions. Want to remind you of information given to us by Mr. Antonacci. The website that you want to be going to get a lot of the information that was asked here today, www.browardsoe.org. That's browardsoe.org. The phone number, 954-357-7050. That's 954-357-7050. Remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at City of Miramar. Visit us also at MiramarFL.gov for the latest and greatest information, and for federal, state, or local resources given to you by the City of Miramar website. Until the next edition of Conversations with Mayor Messam, thank you, have a great evening, and please stay safe.